The movie opens during the Second World War, when the British and French armies have over 400,000 soldiers stranded on Dunkirk, encircled by the enemies. Amidst the uncertainty of their fate, they cling to the hope of a miraculous rescue. We then cut to a group of 6 British soldiers who are walking through the desolate streets of Dunkirk. As they are venturing through abandoned houses for food, supplies, and water, they are suddenly fired at by unseen German soldiers. In the ensuing chaos, 5 of the men are killed, except for one, Tommy. He escapes the gunfire and makes it down to the beach, where thousands of British soldiers line up, waiting to be evacuated. Tommy walks around, watching the devastating sight of hundreds of dead soldiers scattered around the beach. During this, he comes across a young soldier, Gibson, who is burying another soldier in the sand, so he goes to help him. Not long after, the German dive bomber planes fly overhead, dropping several bombs towards the stranded soldiers. As a consequence, many men are struck and killed, but Tommy and Gibson fortunately survive. In the aftermath, the duo finds a wounded soldier left for dead. They quickly come up with an idea. They pretend to be medics and rush the soldier towards a hospital ship, hoping that they will also be rescued. They pass a group of French soldiers who are trying to get on, but are being denied entry under orders. Much to their dismay, Tommy and Gibson are also ordered to go away. But despite this, they manage to hide under the concrete structure, separating the water, called the Mole, until the next vessel shows up. During this time, they overhear Commander Bolton of the Royal Navy, Colonel Winnant, and a Rear Admiral discussing the best way to get their army evacuated. After a while of deliberation, they deduce that the Mole is their only viable way to the warship. Shortly after, the ship they were trying to board is attacked by more German aircrafts, causing it to sink. All the soldiers on board try to swim out of the water to save themselves, and during this, Tommy helps a Highlanders Regiment soldier named Alex. Tommy and Gibson then disguise themselves as the onboarded soldiers who just jumped off the ship. They board on another British Red Cross vessel, along with Alex and several other soldiers. There, they are provided with some food and water. While Tommy, Alex, and the other soldiers enjoy their meal, Gibson walks around, appearing uneasy. Not long after, the ship is hit by a torpedo, causing the water to flood into the lower decks. As it starts to sink, Gibson manages to open a hatch for Tommy, Alex, and a few other men to get out safely. The trio hastily swims towards the small rescue boats to get on board, but it is already crowded. Left with no other choice, they, along with some other soldiers, grab a rope tied to the boat and begin swimming until they reach back to the shore. At this point in time, they are devastated, thinking that no matter how hard they try, they can't get out of Dunkirk. After spending a few hours at the channel off the coast, the surviving British soldiers join up with a small group of the Highland Corps. It turns out that they are heading to a boat that is stuck in the intertidal zone. They can't depart right away as the boat is too heavy to be pushed into the water. As a result, they must wait for the rise in sea tides that hit the shore every 3 hours. A short while later, the boat's sailor returns, and the British soldiers quickly take him into custody, believing that he is an enemy. However, the sailor reveals himself to be Dutch and informs them that they are currently on German land. Just then, their boat starts to get hit by bullets, causing water to enter through the bullet holes. The hidden soldiers are on the verge of retaliating, but Tommy stops them, pointing out that the German soldiers are using the boat as target practice, not because they know they're in there. Are they sure they don't want to shoot at something easier to miss? Now that the water is entering the boat excessively, Alex suggests that they throw Gibson out in order to lighten the boat. Tommy tries to stop him, reminding how he saved their lives earlier. However, Alex remains inconsiderate and asserts that survival is never fair. He also accuses him of being a German spy, since he hasn't spoken the whole time, possibly to disguise his accent. Was? Nein, I mean, oh shoot. In the midst of this heated argument, Gibson speaks up for the first time. He reveals himself to be French and that he took the identity of the British soldier he buried, hoping to be evacuated in the first place. Moments later, the boat floats out of Dunkirk, but it soon starts to sink. The soldiers hastily attempt to patch up the bullet holes, but to no avail. In a desperate attempt to save themselves, they swim out of the boat, but unfortunately, Gibson gets entangled in a chain and tragically ends up drowning. The scene then cuts to England, where the Royal Navy starts taking over private boats in an effort to rescue the soldiers stranded at Dunkirk. In Weymouth, a civilian sailor named Dawson and his son Peter decide to take the matter into their own hands rather than handing over their vessel to the authorities. They set out in their boat Moonstone, and their young helper George joins them on impulse, assuring that he can be of good use to them. On their way towards Dunkirk, they come across a sunken British ship with a shivering, shell-shocked soldier sitting on its top. They slowly approach the wreckage and pull the soldier on board. Dawson asks his name, but the latter is silent. He instead panics and tells them to turn around. around. Get me back to land. I have a bomb to build. However, Dawson refuses to do so, claiming that they are on the mission to save as many soldiers as possible. When the soldier keeps on insisting, Peter locks him up in a compartment, but he escapes through a small opening and demands that they turn the boat around. When the three of them remain adamant, the desperate soldier tries to wrest control of the boat. Amidst their scuffle, the soldier pushes George, causing him to fall into the lower deck and hit his head. Seeing this, Peter immediately goes to tend to his wounds, while the soldier dwells on his actions. George has happened to hit his head so hard that he loses his eyesight. In this critical moment, he reveals to Peter that he came along hoping to do something noteworthy, and that he is proud that he joined them. Upon realizing that George needs immediate medical assistance, Peter goes to his father, but Dawson says that they've come too far to turn back. In the meantime, 3 Royal Air Force Spitfires make their way towards Dunkirk in order to provide cover for the evacuation. However, their operation can last for only 1 hour due to their limited fuel supply. A while later, they spot some German fighter planes in the sky, so they engage in a dogfight with them. Amidst this intense commotion, one of the German planes shoots down the squadron leader, leaving the other pilots, Ferrier and Collins, on their own. To make matters worse, Ferrier also has his fuel gauge smashed, but despite this setback, he does his best to preserve fuel and continue in his attempts to take the enemy plane down. As the battle escalates, Collins' Spitfire is hit by a fighter, forcing him to crash land in the middle of the ocean. As soon as he does so, he proceeds to get out of his aircraft, but the cockpit gets jammed. He frantically tries to break his way out, while the entire aircraft begins to sink. He nearly drowns, but Dawson and Peter reach there in the nick of time to rescue him. They quickly help him get on board before continuing on their rescue mission. On the other hand, Ferrier chooses to continue aiding the evacuation, despite realizing that he will never make it home. By this point in time, more private British boats show up on the waters in order to rescue the stranded soldiers. Meanwhile, a group of surviving soldiers spot a minesweeper and swim towards it in hopes of safety. However, their hopes are soon shattered when the vessel comes under attack by one of the German bomber planes. The explosion causes the seawater to fill with oil, and the soldiers get covered in it. Soon after, the oil catches fire, which results in the tragic demise of several soldiers in the water. Before the enemy bomber plane can launch any further attacks, Ferrier somehow manages to shoot it down. Minutes later, he runs out of fuel, so he activates the gliding mode, making his way towards the beach to land. At the same time, Peter, Collins, and the shivering soldier reach the explosion area, and they pull as many men onto the boat as they can, including Alex and Tommy. As Alex heads towards the lower deck to rest, he finds the lying George, who is no longer alive. He informs this to Dawson and Peter, who can do nothing but grieve. Right then, the nameless, shell-shocked soldier, who is unaware of the demise, asks Peter if George will be okay. Peter does not want the soldier to add up to his trauma, so he lies and simply affirms that he will be fine. The threat is not neutralized yet, as another German bomber plane shows up. Every soldier's heartbeat starts to rise for one more time, fearing for their lives. However, the brave Ferrier, despite being in the gliding mode, chases the enemy aircraft and shoots it down. He then lands his Spitfire on the beach beyond the perimeter, burns it, and calmly awaits capture.
I was born behind enemy lines.
In the aftermath of these events, the Dawsons, as well as the other private boat owners, finally make their way back home after rescuing their stranded soldiers. With more than 300,000 men successfully evacuated, Commander Bolton decides to stay in order to oversee the French evacuation as well. As a result, he sees Colonel Winnant and the last batch of the British Army off. This turned out to be one of the biggest evacuations in history, and many even call it a miracle. It was also a major turning point in the war, forcing the Germans onto the back foot. Once the soldiers arrive in Weymouth, England, they are sent to their respective hometowns via train. While on the train, Alex is worried that they will be met with disgust for returning home after getting defeated in the war. Upon arriving at the Woking station, he receives a newspaper with a message from the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. Reluctant to confront the potential backlash, Alex asks Tommy to read the message aloud. Much to their astonishment, the Prime Minister has commended the bravery and efforts of the soldiers, along with the miraculous escape that they just participated in. However, he mentions that they have not won the war yet, so he encourages the soldiers to prepare to fight on without surrendering. In the final scene, Peter takes George's picture to a local newspaper factory and gets it published, ensuring that the young boy is remembered as a hero for his part in the evacuation. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.